Saturday was supposed to be the highlight of the Italian G7 agenda to help ease the migration crisis, so a number of African leaders joined the talks and posed for the camera. But the US president had his own views and effectively destroyed the plan as he objected to the primary philosophical idea that the refugees represented a global issue. Not that he looked pleased, he looked thoroughly miserable. The Italians were left at the end trying to put a brave face on things.
I didn't expect solutions from the G7 on the question of migration. I appreciated that in the final document and the discussion that we had, there was a dual awareness. The first is we have to work a lot in the medium term as regards Africa in order to tackle the deep-seated reasons for these migratory movements. And let me say in brackets, among those reasons is climate change itself.
The G7 also tried and failed to get Trump to back down on his opposition to the Paris Climate Change Accord, despite what the German Chancellor said were the best efforts of everyone else.
We presented many arguments. I myself said very clearly that the future job market will be very dependent on the efficient use of resources, but also that this is one of the few global agreements in which developing countries, small island nations and Africa are placing great hope. The United States made clear that it hasn't yet made its decision and will not do so here.
At one of the final gatherings, the national leaders all had headphones on to listen to the translation of their host, all except one. It just looked like he really wasn't interested, and it's hard to imagine the others didn't find it insulting. Having previously said he regards NATO as obsolete, it's tempting to wonder exactly how much significance President Trump attributes to the G7. Certainly here, he's looked almost as uncomfortable as Vladimir Putin used to look when Russia was still in the G8. Once again, no news conference from the American president before he finished his world tour, but instead an address to US troops stationed on Sicily. Here, he was far more comfortable.
You're stationed at the crossroads of the Mediterranean, working side by side with Americans to confront the threats associated with the tremendous violence, suffering, and instability across North Africa and the Middle East. Terrorism is a threat, bad threat, to all of humanity, and together we will overcome this threat. We will win.
Whatever else we've learned about the US president during this trip, it appears Europeans in particular will have decided that they may have to work around rather than with him. I think then the thing we've learned about this summit more than anything is when the G7 agenda matches that of President Trump's vision for the United States, he's prepared to agree. So on things like migration as it affects security, cybersecurity, terrorism, he's happy to sign a final communique. But when the G7 wants to do things which are perhaps for the greater good, say African economies or the rights of refugees, or crucially on climate change, if he regards that as not tallying with the interests of the United States, he will resist the rest of the group, a group after all he calls allies. And so given how thin the final communique looks set against what the Italians wanted at the start of this, Mr. Trump can leave regarding it as having been a success for the United States. But for the rest of the G7, his so-called allies, they will regard it, I think, as enormously frustrating that the United States doesn't appear to be on their side.